My daughter-in-law moved into my house with a suitcase and a smile. She left with a court order and nothing else. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it actually happened. My name is Walter. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a civil engineer for the county. Built roads, designed drainage systems, showed up every single day whether it rained or not. My wife, Carol, passed away 4 years ago from a cardiac event that came out of nowhere on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no goodbye. Just a cup of coffee still warm on the kitchen counter when I came home from my morning walk and found her on the kitchen floor. After Carol died, my son Daniel became the most important person in my life. He was 30 at the time, working as a sales manager for a logistics company in the next town over. I was proud of him, still am, in some ways. He had his mother's eyes and my stubbornness, which is a dangerous combination as it turns out. Daniel met his wife Renata about 8 months after Carol passed. I want to be fair here. When I first met Renata, she was perfectly pleasant. She laughed at the right moments, complimented my cooking, asked questions about Carol's garden like she actually cared. I thought Daniel had found someone good. I genuinely thought that. They got married 14 months after they met. Small ceremony, which I paid for. I did it gladly. Carol would have wanted a celebration, and I did my best to give them one, even with the hole in my chest that never fully closed. The first sign of trouble came 6 weeks after the wedding. I had a house, the house Carol and I built together 30 years ago. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a screened porch overlooking the backyard where Carol grew tomatoes every summer. Daniel had his own apartment 20 minutes away. That was fine. That was normal. Then Renata decided the apartment was too small. She didn't ask me directly. That's what I want you to understand. She never asked me directly for anything. She worked through Daniel like a hand works through a puppet. One Sunday evening, Daniel called and said, "Dad, we were thinking, would you mind if we stayed with you for a few months while we save up for a bigger place? It would mean a lot." I said yes. Of course I said yes. He was my son. They moved in on a Saturday in March. By the following Saturday, Renata had rearranged my living room without asking. She pushed Carol's reading chair into the corner and replaced it with a piece of furniture she called an accent bench that was uncomfortable to sit on and served no practical purpose that I could identify. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was a small thing. 3 weeks later, she told me my kitchen organization system was inefficient and reorganized my cabinets. I couldn't find my coffee mugs for 2 days. A month after that, she informed me, informed me, that her sister was coming to stay for a week and would need the guest room, which was the room directly across from mine, the room where Carol kept her sewing machine and her fabric boxes. I had not touched that room since Carol died. I wasn't ready to touch it. Renata had already moved Carol's things into the garage before she told me. Boxes stacked along the garage wall. Carol's fabric, Carol's sewing machine, Carol's little wooden thread organizer she'd had since before Daniel was born. All of it in the garage. I stood in the garage for a long time that afternoon. I didn't cry. I was past crying by then. I was something else. Something quieter and harder. I talked to Daniel that evening. I sat him down at the kitchen table, the same table where I had helped him with homework for 12 years, and I told him that I needed him to speak to Renata about boundaries, that this was still my home, that Carol's things deserved respect. Daniel looked uncomfortable. He looked at the table. He said, "Dad, she didn't mean anything by it. She's just trying to make the place feel more like home." "It is my home," I said. "I know, Dad. I know. Just give her some time." I gave her some time. The months stretched. 3 became 6. 6 became 9. Every time I asked Daniel about their plan to find their own place, there was a new reason for delay. The market was bad. They needed to save more. Renata was stressed at work. Always something. I began to understand that there was no plan, that the temporary arrangement had quietly become permanent without anyone asking my permission. By the time they had been living with me for 11 months, Renata had effectively taken over the house. She chose what we watched in the evenings. She controlled the thermostat. She hosted her friends in my living room on Friday nights while I sat in my bedroom because the noise gave me headaches, and she had never once thought to ask if that was all right. She had also started making comments about the house itself. Little things at first. This place would really open up if you took out that wall. The bathroom tile is so dated, don't you think? Has anyone ever talked to you about refinancing? You're sitting on a lot of equity here. That last one I remembered, I filed it away. The moment that changed everything happened on a Thursday evening in October. I had been out for my evening walk, the same route I had been walking since Carol died, 2 miles through the neighborhood and back. When I came home, I found Renata on the phone in the kitchen, leaning against the counter I had installed myself in 1987. She was talking to someone I would find out later it was her brother, and she didn't notice me come in through the back door. I heard her say, "The old man won't be a problem much longer. Once Daniel gets on the deed, we move fast. 2 years, maybe less, and we sell. Split the profit and start over somewhere new." I stood in my own kitchen doorway and listened to my daughter-in-law describe the plans she had for my home. My home. The home where I had raised my son, buried my wife, grown old slowly, and with as much dignity as I could manage. I didn't make a sound. I walked back out the door, sat on the porch steps, and stayed there until it was dark. That night, I made a decision. I was not going to react. I was not going to confront. I had learned enough in 63 years to know that a man who reacts from emotion makes mistakes. I was going to be patient. I was going to be careful. And I was going to protect everything Carol and I had built together. The next morning, I called my attorney. Her name is Patricia Howe. I had used Patricia 3 years ago when I updated my will after Carol passed. She was thorough and direct, which is exactly what I needed. I told Patricia everything. The overheard conversation, the months of behavior, the reorganization of the house, the comments about the equity. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Walter, you did the right thing calling me before doing anything else. Here's what we're going to do." Patricia's first instruction was simple and absolutely clear. Do not tip them off. Do not change your behavior. Do not make them feel suspicious. Continue as normal while we build documentation. I followed that instruction to the letter. For the next 6 weeks, I was the same quiet, cooperative father-in-law I had always been. I had dinner with them. I watched television I didn't enjoy. I said good morning and good night and passed the salt. Meanwhile, Patricia was working. She first conducted a thorough review of my property documents. The house was in my name alone. Carol's name had been removed from the deed when she passed, and I had never added Daniel's name despite several gentle suggestions from Renata over the months, suggestions I had smiled at and never acted on, which turned out to be the first smart thing I did without realizing it. Patricia also connected me with a private investigator named Howard, a quiet man in his 50s who did mostly civil work. Howard reviewed my account history at Patricia's request and identified 3 separate instances over the past 2 years where money had moved from my account in ways I had not fully scrutinized. Small transfers I had thought they were automatic bill payments, things Daniel had set up to help me after I mentioned once that online banking confused me. They were not bill payments. Howard traced 2 of them back to Renata's personal account. One was just under $2,000. One was $1,100. The third was murkier, but pointed in the same direction. I sat in Patricia's office when she told me this, and I felt a cold settle into my chest that had nothing to do with temperature. My own son's wife had been taking money from my account while living rent-free in my house, while eating my food, while sitting on my porch. Patricia read my face. She said, "Walter, I need you to hold it together a little longer. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. And I meant it. What I did not tell Patricia, because I did not want to worry her, was that I had also spoken with my neighbor, a retired electrician named Jean, who had been friends with Carol and me for 25 years. Jean had done some work in the house years ago and knew the layout well. I asked Jean to help me install 2 small cameras, one in the living room facing the entryway, one in the kitchen. Both pointed away from any private spaces, both clearly mounted, nothing hidden in walls. Jean had them up in an afternoon. I told Patricia about the cameras afterward. She was not thrilled with me. She said, "Walter, you should have asked me first." Then she looked at the footage Jean helped me pull up on my laptop, and she stopped talking about what I should have done and started talking about what we had. The footage was not dramatic. It was not a moment of villainy. It was something quieter and in some ways worse. It was Renata on 4 separate occasions going through my desk in the study while I was out on my walks. Opening drawers, photographing documents with her phone, looking for something Patricia believed she was looking for, the property deed and insurance documents. It was also Renata on the phone, again, 2 weeks after the first conversation I had overheard. This time the camera caught it. I could not make out every word, but Howard was able to clean up the audio and transcribe enough of it to be useful. The phrase, "he has no idea," appeared twice. Patricia filed a formal notice of trespass and unauthorized access. She also filed a civil complaint regarding the financial transfers, and she reached out to Daniel directly through a formal letter that arrived at the house on a Wednesday morning. I was in the kitchen when Daniel came downstairs with that letter. His face was the color of old paper. He said, "Dad, what is this?" I said, "Sit down, son." He sat. I told him everything. Not the angry version, not the version where I accused and pointed fingers. I told him calmly, and in order, the way I would explain a structural problem to a junior engineer. Here is what I observed. Here is what was found. Here is what it means. Daniel did not speak for a long time. He kept looking at the letter, and then at me, and then back at the letter. Then he said, "She told me the transfers were things you agreed to. She said you asked her to help manage some of the bills." I never said that. I told him. I never gave anyone access to that account except myself. He looked like a man who had just realized the floor he was standing on had been hollow the whole time. Renata came downstairs 20 minutes later. She had heard enough of our conversation through the ceiling to know something had changed. She walked into the kitchen and looked at the letter in Daniel's hand, and then she looked at me, and something shifted in her expression. The pleasantness I had seen in her for 3 years was simply gone. What was underneath was cooler and sharper. She said, "Walter, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I said, "Renata, my attorney will be in touch." She looked at Daniel. Daniel didn't look back at her. The civil case took several months to work through. Patricia was precise and prepared at every step. Renata hired her own attorney, a man who tried several times to reframe what had happened as a family financial arrangement with poor communication on all sides. Patricia dismantled that argument methodically, using the account records, the camera footage, and the transcript of Renata's phone conversation that Howard had recovered. The case was settled before it went to a full hearing. Renata agreed to repay the full amount that had been transferred without my authorization, $4,200. Plus a penalty negotiated by Patricia. She and Daniel were required to vacate my property within 30 days. A formal order was issued preventing Renata from accessing my financial accounts or property records in any capacity. She moved out on a gray November morning. I watched from the screen porch, the same porch where I had sat on a dark October night after hearing what she planned to do with my home. She carried boxes to a moving truck. She did not look at me. Daniel moved out the same day, but separately. He loaded his things into his car and came to find me before he left. He stood in the kitchen doorway, which is where hard conversations have always happened in this house, and he said, "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have known." "You should have," I said. I wasn't cruel about it. I wasn't warm about it either. I was honest, which is the most I knew how to be. I told him I loved him. I told him that was not in question. I told him that trust was going to take time and I was not going to pretend otherwise, but that the door was not closed. He nodded. He left. That evening I went to the garage. I opened the boxes Renata had put there 8 months earlier, Carol's fabric, her thread organizer, her sewing machine. I carried them back inside, back to the room across the hall, and I set them where they belonged. I didn't organize anything that night. I just put them back in the room and I sat in the chair in the corner for a while in the quiet. This house is mine. It was Carol's and mine, and now it's mine alone. And I intend to keep it that way. 31 years of early mornings and long days and honest work went into the roof over this porch. My wife's hands went into the garden along the back fence. There is nothing in these walls that belongs to someone who is only ever counting what it was worth. What I want people to take from this, especially those of you who may be in similar situations, who feel that something is slowly being taken from you and you can't quite name it, is that you don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to lose your temper. You don't have to do anything dramatic. You have to pay attention. You have to document what you see. You have to find people who know the law and trust them. And you have to hold on to who you are long enough to see it through. Patience isn't weakness. It's the sharpest tool I know.